let's just focus on solving this one small problem and have a big impact.
Right. Welcome to the latest edition of A Bird's Eye View. I'm Paul Kirkcaldy, the Managing Director of Sparro Creative, and today I've got Piers Tincknell from Atomic Smash, based in Bristol. Piers, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Paul.
Good. Right, so today, Piers, you and I have been talking loads about iterative design, agile delivery models versus kind of older school waterfall, and specifically about how we design the right program of work for clients at that early stage of a project. So let's get started and dig into that. But first, I wanted to find out a little bit about you and your career to date. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. So my career as such has been quite straightforward, to be honest. So I went to university in Plymouth, and I studied a really well-respected course called Digital Art and Technology. That was from 2005 to 2009, and it was a sandwich degree. That course was amazing because it was quite well renowned, actually. It incorporated lots of new emerging technologies. So we were doing modules in Flash and Director. We did a few modules in artificial intelligence, human computer interaction modules, which is what kind of then turned into UX. We did a bit of hardware as well. The iPhone then came out in 2016, and that was like instantly rolled into our module and into our course. So it was really progressive. And the thing that it really taught us, especially, was about how quickly technology can move, because we graduated in 2009 and Flash was basically already dead by 2010. So it taught us a lot around how quickly you need to be able to evolve with technologies as they come, how to pick up new technologies really quickly and be able to use them as fast as possible, really. And I then, after graduating, pretty much went straight into setting up a business with one of my course mates. Did a tiny bit of industry, which was really valuable. So my sandwich degree, I did a placement year at a web design agency. And then with one of my course mates, we set the business up in October 2010, I think it was.
Okay, cool. So straight out of university into founding your own business. That's, well, incredibly ballsy. First off the bat. But you know what? Given the kind of current economic climate and if you believe everything you read, the prospects for graduates and this year in particular, what sort of advice would you give somebody coming out of university looking at their prospects and thinking, well, maybe it is best that I go and start something for myself? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a totally valid option. I think we had a lot of confidence to do it because we both come from self-employed families. So I had seen my parents have their own business, so I knew that was a good option for me, or I felt that it was the right thing to do. David's family's the same kind of background as well. But I do think it's worth not just graduating and thinking, right, I need to get a job. It's worth exploring other opportunities. I mean, the freelance market at the moment is really buoyant. I know loads of freelancers who are doing really well, and that's the other thing to remember, I guess, as well. Working for yourself doesn't have to be set up your own business or set up your own company necessarily. It can just be being a freelancer. So I'd say explore all options, to be honest, and try and get lots of exposure or lots of time in different kind of areas.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you tell us a little bit about Atomic Smash then. You guys are coming up to about 10 years now, right?
Yeah, that's right. So in October, we'll be 10 years old, and it's been amazing, really. So we set it up in Bristol. So after graduating from Plymouth, we came to Bristol, and it's changed loads. So it was just me and David at the start. There was two of us, and at the beginning, kind of in line with our course and part of our kind of background in technology, we were just willing to take on any project. So we would do anything really, from like mini brand projects to 3D projects to audio projects, film recording, and then we did a few websites as well. And after a while, we decided that websites was really where our passion was, and that was what we found most exciting, because the whole website experience and like customer journey and the way you build projects is so multidisciplinary that it really lent itself really nicely to our quite broad skill set. So I was leading up the front end of the projects and doing kind of like business analyst pieces or user insights, customer research, UX, and then the UI side of things, and then David's skills lend itself nicely to the back end and development. After 3 years, we grew from 2 to 4, and then we really started to pick up WordPress and knuckle down and kind of focus on that as our core offering. And kind of the rest of history of that, really. We've just grown and grown and grown. So there's 14 of us in the company at the moment. We build really long-term partnerships with a lot of our clients. So there's kind of 2 parts to our business. One is long-term continuous delivery offering, which is this more iterative design approach. And then there's the other part, which is the more traditional waterfall project style for design and building big sites. But kind of like, I guess like, and one of our core values, it hasn't changed since we started, and it kind of feeds all the way back to that university course, is around change. And change is good, and it's good to embrace new technologies, and it's good to embrace new ways of working. And we've kind of draw that into the team. When somebody starts to work with us, we say, if you don't like change, then we're probably not the best place for you to work. We will be liking to change things quite regularly. That's internally and kind of externally with clients and their websites.
I suppose you have to, don't you, with the industry that you're in, and as you said right at the start of it, it's you know, the digital environment changes so frequently that you have to adapt with the role that technology plays in consumer lives, the adoption of new digital formats, and the way that we consume information.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, and every technology has a shelf life. That's the other thing that I think a lot of people forget, or just they assume these things are going to be around forever, and because it's the norm at the time, people forget that everything that's software or everything that's technology ultimately will become redundant. So the best way to combat it is to just evolve and change and improve things in little increments, rather than waiting until your system gets to the end of its life and then having to go through a whole new design and build process necessarily. So yeah, so it's quite interesting, and it's meant that kind of the team that we've had to build is very customer facing. So people, when they work with us, they work directly with the practitioners, who are the developers and the designers who are building out their projects. So we've got this really good, well-rounded skill set internally of great communicators and really brilliant technical minds and design minds. So it's quite, it's nice. It's really feels like a really good team that we've kind of been able to pull together based on that.
So that's really interesting. So I, for one, am glad that Flash, for example, had a shelf life.
Yes.
I still have nightmares from building websites in Flash back in the day. But it's interesting what you said about your practitioners having those softer skills that you would, I guess, traditionally associate with the account handling or the client services team within an agency. I've worked in a number of different agencies with different specialisms, and something that struck me a few years back was that clients really do want to speak to specialists. They want to speak to people who are doing the work on the ground. And there was, I should say, a trend towards client services and project management kind of morphing together. And what I was seeing is that those people weren't necessarily keeping up with the specialism that the people doing the work. And so they were becoming a bit of a messaging board or a filter between those specialists and clients. So it's really interesting to see that you've got people with the capability, that, you know, the difficult capability, plus the merging of softer skills as well.
Yeah, and that all came through the client feedback, kind of like you said. So it was what the clients wanted, so it was what we wanted to give them. And I think the reason we started off quite strong is because me and David had the personable skills alongside the technical skills, and it just meant that we were very easy to kind of do work with and to help people out on these technical problems, and we were able to translate quite big challenges into quite easy to understand kind of statements of work and that side of things.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that then, because I think those early stage conversations with clients when they come to you with with a brief for a new website, shall we say, are always absolutely key. So
Yeah.
you and I have debated about the challenges of how you discover or develop what the right delivery approach for a client is going to be, and actually whether they really do need a new website or not.
Yes.
What's driven them to that conclusion? How do you go about identifying what those key factors are?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and every project is different, I guess, and every client's needs are different. So the things that we look out for when we're trying to decide on what kind of what's going to be the right delivery model for a client is firstly that question that you just said. So do they need a new website, or can they iterate on what they've got? Can it be extended or improved?
Mm-hmm.
When we're thinking about if a platform can be extended on or improved, things that we look for are what's the underlying technology? Is it well supported? Is it continually being worked on and developed? So for example, we work a lot on WordPress, and WordPress is a great platform because it's constantly being improved in the background by this community of developers, and it gets updated and we're constantly getting new versions out. Whereas other technology stacks, like say for example Magento, that's just hit the end of Magento 1's life, I think it is, and now you have to move on to Magento 2, so you can't even continue to extend or improve that original platform. So one of the questions is, what's the underlying tech stack, and does that lend itself to being kind of improved over a long period of time? If it is, then our kind of ideal preference would be around the more continuous improvement model. But if it can't be, then maybe a more waterfall approach is the right solution for that client. But I mean, again, there's lots more to discuss around it, around things like how much data does the client have to make decisions on? Are we making informed decisions? Or are we making decisions based on opinions? That will, again, kind of determine on what delivery model we want to go for.
Mm-hmm.
If all the decisions are really well researched and there's a lot of grounds for why things are being done in the way they've been done, then a more waterfall approach and building something big and it takes a long time is a little bit better, because you're obviously closer to the final answer or the best answer.
Yeah.
If you haven't got any research, then getting something out there early and testing it and running with a bit more of an MVP in a maybe more agile model or iterative model is much better. So how much data is around and how well informed the project is. Again, kind of speed of delivery totally depends on the model that you might want to run with as a project. So speed of delivery, if they need something up and running as fast as possible and then we can roll out new features post live, that would lend itself better to one model than another. Also, I think the biggest factor as well is around how the client operates internally. If they've got loads of time and loads of effort, then they're definitely able to work in a different way to a client who's very time poor and they just want to buy in a supplier who's just going to do this project kind of in the background almost. And that really, I think for me, that's one of the biggest factors on what model is best for a project, what model best suits the client, to be honest. And
so without wanting to sound derogatory in any way, how much does the experience and the expertise of the client then come into play at this point as well? Because obviously the client, if they're involved in an agile delivery program, they've got to be making decisions with the team in quite a rapid environment. And they've also got to be able to go back into the internal function and be able to confidently demonstrate where progress is being made, reassure stakeholders that, look, the end product will look like this. Whereas, and those internal stakeholders may not be digitally literate in any way, shape or form, and are expecting to see something in its entirety.
Yeah, I think the digital competency of the client is massively important. And when we start a project, one of the first questions I always ask them is, who's the project lead or who's the working team on your side, and how many website projects have they been involved in? Because if they've only been involved in one, or this is their first one, then we know the methodology or the program of work is going to have to be a lot more intensive to hold their hand and explain all the decisions, and all the art working and the prototypes have to be maybe more thorough than if they've been through a website project 3 or 4 times and they just get it and they kind of get digital. And so for us, there's a bit of a training up the client on digital competency and digital skills and explaining things that I think is really important. And I think in the future, this again might sound maybe a little bit extreme, but in the future, anyone running a big digital project internally should have somebody who's very experienced in that and have done it before. I think it's too much to expect somebody else to be able to just to run it all for you and for it all to be as smooth as possible. The best projects that we've run have had very technical people on the client side who just know and just get it, because they are difficult. Website projects, software projects are very difficult. And I think a lot of the relationship breakdowns just come from misunderstandings or clients thinking something's easy when it's actually very, very difficult, or not fully appreciating how many unknowns are in these projects. And the more digitally savvy they are, the more accepting they are as these stumbling blocks that will come up with every digital project.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, let's I'm going to use dirty words now. Let's talk about agile. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in a I've been in a consultancy where everybody was a specialist, and agile delivery was very much the way that we brought projects to life. And then I've been in other agencies where the term agile isn't necessarily agile. I've also been on the receiving end of these conversations with a lot of clients where they've stated that they want an agile delivery model within the client brief. And when you dig into that, agile is actually a misconstrued word for utter chaos.
Yes.
Let's talk about agile, because it is a misused and not a very well understood term, right? So how does an iterative design process in an agile model benefit the client, or does it not benefit clients?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what is and what isn't agile. And like you said, it's definitely not just another way of saying unorganized or let's just make it up as we go along. There is obviously a very good process that surrounds it. And I think this kind of model that we work to, which isn't truly agile, but it's very iterative and it's very good at solving small problems, tackling things like little and often, is really beneficial for clients. And I think it's definitely, if you're able to work in this way, it's definitely the best way to work going forwards. And it's because of the fact that you can compartmentalize problems down into small parts, and you can just focus on that one, and then you can kind of silo them off and fix them, and then build them out and roll them into the project, and just tackle these problems little and often, rather than big chunks of work. And I agree as well, it's definitely not the right model for everyone, because not all clients can work in a very collaborative manner. So like agile, I guess, is like super collaborative. You almost need to be both in the same room pretty much for the duration of the project. That's the best way it works. And you need to have all the decision makers there who can make these executive decisions and don't need to go to the board and such things. Whereas iterative is good because you can still have a degree of separation, because the problems that you're solving are maybe much smaller and they can be rolled into bigger programs of work. So iterative is really collaborative, but it's not as collaborative as agile, where you need to almost be in the same space and working at exactly the same time. Iterative is a bit more, let's take this thing like the checkout, for an example. Let's use a bit of data to understand why it's not working, and let's just focus on solving this one small problem and have a big impact on the project and the success of the website.
So I think that's really interesting, particularly when we in in the situation we're in currently, where we know a recession is going to soon follow,
Hmm.
budgets, particularly marketing budgets, are going to be squeezed again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, brands' online presence just still needs investment. So
Hmm.
the notion that actually you don't necessarily need to throw the baby out of the bathwater, and
Yes.
if you can identify and test components of your site with minimal investment,
Yeah.
see how that performs, put it back into market, and if you've got an uplift, then great, because
Yeah.
actually that piece of work is now already washing its face.
Hmm.
And then it makes it easier for a client, doesn't it, to then prove that the investment was worthwhile, go back into the business, back to the FD with
Yeah.
a business case to ask for more money, to say, look, this is what we did, this is how it worked, right, now we want to roll out X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
rather than the full, we need to re-platform, we need to rebuild, start
Yeah.
again, and the quote that we've got is 100 plus.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, totally. And the other thing alongside that is a full website project would take kind of 6, 8, 12 months, for example, and the budgets will be massive, and you might get really good return and results by, like you said, just focusing on improving one small area.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have to do the whole website to see an improvement on how people are using it. So I think that's another thing that's really important to remember is, when these businesses are thinking about, right, we need to get some more improvement out of our website, a new website is always 6+ months away, whereas just fixing the checkout or just redesigning the homepage can have a massive impact as well. So yeah, I think it's really important to think you don't have to always start again. You can build on what you've got already, as long as you've got a good backbone platform to work on. The other thing as well, I just mentioned around this kind of more iterative design approach, it lends itself to much longer term relationships. So you are seen as more of a true partner with the client rather than just a supplier. When you come in and you're maybe working agile and you do 5 sprints to do a piece of work, you're kind of just seen as this person who comes in and they solve problems and then they go again. Whereas working in more of a iterative design approach, you have to know the business kind of inside out, and you're there for the long term. Really, you're not just solving problems for the short term, which I think
Presumably that's
again a lot of
because,
businesses benefit from.
okay, so presumably that's because you've got data to work from, that you're using to then inform design decision making. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we'll use tools like Google Analytics or Google Optimize or Lucky Orange, or kind of a whole different suite of tools to understand how areas of the website are working.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll use that data to inform design decisions, and then test after they've been implemented as well. That's the most important part, really, is this testing and monitoring to see how the website is being used. And then if it's not being used in the way that you want it to use, change it and improve it.
Do you think because often the ongoing support maintenance of a web project is kind of the afterthought,
Mm-hmm.
and actually it feels, talking to you, it feels like this is something that actually should be given far more prominence in terms of initial conversations, budget, what the relationship looks like moving forward beyond this program of work. Because as we know, once you get a website live, that's not it done, is it?
No,
You get a website live, and that's almost the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think people do start need to see their big or more commercially enterprise businesses should be seeing their websites as this kind of platform or sales platform or tool, rather than it just being a more static brochure or static website. I mean, if your website takes 8 months to design and build, it's more likely than not that it's going to be a little bit out of date by the time it gets out into market, because markets change really quickly and you need to be able to adapt to how they change quite quickly. So I think anyone who's launching a website now, if they're not expecting to change it regularly going forwards, they need to rethink about their kind of strategy.
I saw data published by McKinsey a couple of weeks ago, and it was all about the speed or change in speed that decision making within organizations is going to happen. So you've got examples of where decision making pre-COVID was quarterly or monthly.
Right, yeah.
That decision making is now down to weekly.
Yes.
So if you think as an agency, you've been briefed to 6 months ago to design a website. That's 6 months. Almost that data, that decision making that's happening within the organization. If it's now happening at a weekly level, that they are suddenly upweighting, focus on a particular product line, or the data's telling us that we're not selling this, so we need to shift from an online into a direct to consumer sale. That definitely lends itself to an iterative design process, doesn't it? That speed of decision making that organizations are now going to be needing to keep pace with.
Yeah, the beauty of the iterative design process as well is studio and client, or partner and client, have this collaborative backlog of requests. So because you're working on the project very regularly, if a new priority comes in, you can just escalate it to
drop something else down.
Top of the pile. Yeah, exactly. And that's why it works really well, because the client's feeding in the priorities, and then we or whoever's the supplier is able to jump on them relatively quickly and get something out to market quite speedily. We've got some clients who kind of across their products, we work on them daily almost. And then other clients we're kind of doing a couple of days a week, which again, it just means as and when these business priorities come in, we are well placed to help them to realize them out to market. I guess the other thing as well that we put a lot of effort into that not a lot of other studios do so much is we make our websites as modular and client friendly as possible, in the way that they can still build all of these campaigns and landing pages themselves. So as well as us doing a lot, we kind of put the power over to the client, so they can still do a lot of the important things that they need to do
with their own in-house internal teams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they through like a page builder approach, or this kind of modular design approach, it means they've got a lot of power still themselves. They're not relying on us always to build a new page for them. We can put our effort and energy into more sensitive areas like the checkout, or running campaigns.
So
like that.
They do some of the heavy lifting in terms of tasks, but actually you get to focus more on the, I guess, bigger ticket items that are going to take up more time. I suppose that in one way that maximizes their use of budget as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we're not wasting our time working on little things. We can focus on the big problems that they just shouldn't be able to solve themselves.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's good, and we find it, like I said, just creates that really good relationship. It's like a true partnership, really. Kind of goes both ways. And I guess one of the biggest challenges with iterative, which is similar to working agile, is this way of estimating and trying to understand how long something is going to take. So a client presents you with a task, you then essentially have to put an effort estimate against it so that they can know how to prioritize it. If it's a 20-day effort piece of work, they're probably not going to want to jump on it straight away if it's not going to have a big impact and create a lot of value for them. Whereas if it's 1 day of effort, but the impact is going to be massive, that goes straight to the top of the pile, and then we can do it. But as with every technical project, which you all know, estimating how long things take is a real fine art. And again, you just need to have this real understanding between client and studio, where sometimes they'll win and you will estimate it's going to be 3 days and it only takes 1 day. And then sometimes you'll kind of end up having to you'll estimate it's going to be 3 days, but actually it takes 5 days, and it just balances itself out in the long run. But it's very difficult. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I think. And the best way to solve that is through having just a good, honest relationship with the client, where they don't think you're trying to always get one over on them by spending longer on things. And you know that they trust you. It all comes down to trust, really.
Yeah. Well, you earn that trust, don't you?
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Totally. Okay, cool. So just going back over my notes then from this conversation, I've been making a few points here around the benefits of the iterative design process, and I guess really what it is that's needed from a client perspective to ensure that this is a model that works for them? Because this is where our
Yes.
conversations always started, wasn't it? It was like, well, how do you know whether you need to do something which is purely waterfall for a client because they,
Yeah.
they need all the checks and balances in place,
Yeah.
versus something that is far more agile. And dare I
Yeah.
even use the term in the middle, which pure play developers can we fall, but wagile,
Yeah.
that
I've
blend
heard
of,
that one banded around a little bit as well.
I think I've actually used that in a client meeting before, and eyes rolled a lot, a lot of eyes rolled. But look, so what we're looking for in terms of a client and their capabilities is somebody with experience. If we're going to go
Yes.
down that iterative design route, that they really need to have run digital programs of work
Yeah.
prior to this. There needs to be trust in that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately what you're not going to do is, like a waterfall program of work where you go, right, well, this is what it's going to look like because we've designed everything before we even start build. We've designed some components. You're going to have to be able to use your imagination in some way to be able to see how this is all going to piece together down the line. They have to have the capacity
Yes.
to be part of the team, because decision making is fairly rapid, and it might be that they've got to sit there and be able to go, okay, you know what, we've spent enough time over here on this now, actually this is a priority, we're going to have to move over to this. That's done enough.
Yes.
Which is it was a fairly strange concept to me when I went into a experience design consultancy, to hear that term of at what point is it enough?
Yeah.
Because you can, design and design and design and design and design.
Iterate forever, yeah.
But actually, what is that point where that's good enough? Move over here now.
Yeah.
And then there's this, I guess the last one, which is, maybe it wraps all of them up, but it's the ability and the confidence to be able to demonstrate that constant change back into the internal stakeholders and be able to manage those internal stakeholders, because ultimately they're the project sponsor. And I mean, I've been involved in programs of work where we haven't had that, and actually a large chunk of the team's time has gone into then having to manage internal stakeholders to demonstrate this is where we are, this is what's next, that's taking longer than this because of these reasons. And really all that's doing is taking away from progressing work any further, and it's chewing up budget. So they need to have that confidence and those communication skills to be able to take that progress back internally and to manage those internal stakeholders. Yeah,
Totally agree.
Okay, cool. So that's us wrapping up then on this particular interview around designing the right digital program of work, the type of capabilities that are needed. And also it's been really interesting hearing, and it always is, this is my favorite part of doing these interviews, is always hearing about people's career journeys. And I love the fact that you came straight out of uni and founded your own business, and here we are 10 years later, and I saw this week that you made 2 more hires, which is fantastic. So you're still growing despite everything else that's going on. So look, Piers, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, as it always is. Wish you guys all the best, and thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Okay, cheers, Piers.
Thanks.